Good evening and welcome to Zion's Banner. We should be right about on time getting started this evening. Now, this is the evening where we do more Bible study. And really, I guess next to my love of apologetics is my love of exegetical Bible study. Now, originally, I got to do this Matthew series at a Messianic congregation. So that means by the time I got to preach, I got about a half hour. Although my wife's grandfather, who was an itinerant preacher, said that if you don't strike oil in 30 minutes, stop boring. So this may be a little shorter than our other broadcasts. You know, I really can't make that always time out perfectly, but that's okay. You know, I'd rather say what God wants me to say than say what God doesn't want me to say. And so, for that reason alone, if it's a little short, we've got a little time to say goodbye to folks. I don't know if yesterday was a no-no, but it was great for our community. I got to pray with sweet tea, and so that was really worthwhile. And so, you know, I'm still trying to get my head around all of this, but if you have a community, I think you need to act like a community. And so that's the reason for doing that. Hey, just a little bit of a praise. I don't know if it's charging and if it'll work, but I got the phone mic for going out and doing the evangelism. It came today. So if it charges correctly, I'm like all set to take it. And I borrowed Mel's the last time. Shout out to Mel. But this time I can start using it, and I have some other ideas for it too. And so I'm kind of excited about that. When he actually tuned in, the station's going to be designed so that I can hand out a card so that people I share with um, can actually go see their interviews. And what I'm really hoping, you know, and Mel was kind of hoping with this whole thing is it'll give people a second shot, and it might give me contact with some folks who have some questions. So without further delay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to the camera plus our lesson for tonight. It'll take a second or two to show up because of the delay. We are in Matthew. Now, we have finished the section where Jesus is talking about his relationship to the law. And we kind of covered that. And it's really tricky. In fact, there's still another book I want to read on the subject. And unbeknownst to me, it's becoming a major area of expertise. And so we're moving out of that. We're actually moving into the Torah of Messiah. And we're looking at the exact instruction that Moses gave to his disciples, which is going to be binding on them. I mean, the question of whether there's a law of Christ and whether Christians are free from any sort of moral obligation comes up all the time. And the answer is no, definitely. We have definite moral commands and we're not free from moral obligations. But the centerpiece of Jesus' teaching, really from here all the way through and into chapter 7, is the bulk of the Torah of Messiah. This is the authoritative instruction for Jesus's community, and he's going to up the standard. And we're going to see kind of how he does that. We're going to actually get a feel from this presentation as to why. And so let's get started. And you should be able to see the PowerPoint. Just a word to remind you, Thursday is not going to be a normal broadcast. It's the day when we all experience turkey coma. And so I will be experiencing mine in the evening. But I do want to do a little like shout out somehow and go ahead and say hi because I really want to wish you guys a happy Thanksgiving. I just don't know how to work. So maybe it'll be a live few minute thing. I don't know. But I want to do something because really you guys are absolutely great, all of you. So. And if there are other visitors, you will be great too. Or we will have a blast talking, you know, having you come in and hear this material. If you hear it afterwards, that's great too. I want to get it out. But let's move on. The heart of the matter is the matter of the heart. There's your refrigerator magnet saying. I used to come up with these little sayings And for the most part, I thought they were pretty original. And so the matter of the heart is the heart of the matter, and we're going to see that. And really, that pervades Jesus's teaching. But we're going to take a look at the actual section here. So I'm going to go ahead and do a click. The take-home truth is what's on the outside, inside works its way out. And so that's your take-home. And if you get nothing else from that, there's a principle that you have to work with, that what's on the inside works its way out. Now, Jesus is going to discuss murder. Isn't that interesting? How many murderers did he think he was going to have in the group? Because of the way he's going to treat the command, thou shalt not kill, really maybe more than you'd suspect. Because his definition is going to be a little different than what we would excuse. By the way, understand something. When I'm out on the streets, everybody wants to justify themselves. Everybody wants to go ahead and appear neutral or justify themselves. And so Jesus doesn't let folks off the hook. And although he's talking to his disciples, he's going to go ahead and up the ante. He's dealing with the Ten Commandments, but he's giving us his authoritative interpretation of those commandments and really giving us the law of Messiah in a sense. Which is at the heart is the spirit of Torah. So let's get into this. I'm going to go ahead and read this. I am going to switch the other slide, okay? You saw this slide last week. It's up again because we need to understand Jesus has the right to do this. Jesus is not merely commentating, he's also giving authoritative instruction. And I don't want anybody thinking that Jesus is merely telling us, but you need to understand this is going to be binding in the sense that really this is the standard. And it's important we understand that this is the standard. Let me read you the passage while that's sitting up there. You have heard it said to those of old, you shall not murder. And whoever murders shall be in danger of judgment. Now, the first part is a clear command out of Deuteronomy. The second part was understood by the people. But I say to you that whosoever is angry with his brother without cause shall be in danger of judgment, and whosoever says to his brother, Raka, shall be in danger of the council. But whoever says, you fool, shall be in danger of hellfire. Therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar and you there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift before the altar, go your way, first be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Agree with your adversary quickly while you are on the way with him, lest your adversary deliver you to the judge, and the judge hand you over to the officer, and you be thrown into prison. Assuredly, I say to you, you will by no means get out of there till you have paid your last penny. So there's the teaching there. And we're going to start to dig into it. The application, the issue here is malicious hatred. Now, I want to put this in a rabbinical sort of context here. Some tractates are earlier than others, okay? But material in the very early tractates, or in tractates like Avodah Zarah, which actually means strange worship or strange service, because the word's the same for both, allowed discrimination against non-Jewish people. I've got to go ahead and admit that. There are some really unflattering things that the rabbis have to say about women and non-Jewish people. And so you need to be aware of this. This is going to be in contrast to that to a large degree. Now, why was this tolerated? Given the nature of God's law and the nature of loving God and loving your neighbor, you would think that this material in this tractates wouldn't appear and wouldn't be acceptable in the mind of the Jews of that day. Well, understand that Israel had been surrounded by enemy nations. And some of the experience that they had with the Philistines and the Amorites and the Canaanites and the Jebusites were not all that pleasant. And they aren't having a really, really good, pleasant time with the Romans. So, from that standpoint, they have some negative experiences here that they're kind of working off of. And so some of this material comes out of these terribly negative experiences that they've had with other nations. And so they felt somewhat justified in giving some comeuppance back to these nations. And so this material or this anti Gentile sentiment, due to their experiences, um, ends up getting into things like Avodah Zarah. They were also very worried about individuals coming into the community, like the Midianite women, and leading the children of Israel away from true worship. In other words, they were worried about syncretism and idolatry and paganism coming into the fold. And so that's why you end up getting some of this material. So there are reasons for this. Does that make it acceptable? No. If I have a bad experience with someone, do I get to discriminate against everybody of that kind? No, I don't. Discrimination based on background or ethnicity is antithetical to the commands that Jesus is going to lay down here. So we need to understand that. But you do need to understand why Israelites carried some of this stuff around. And so that's why this is here. Jesus leaves no room for hating your fellow man or woman made in the image of God. So when the Jews looked at thou shalt not kill, by the way, thou shalt not murder, they didn't look at it as commanding thou shalt not kill, by the way. I had a great discussion with a yeshiva student when I used to take Greyhound and not fly, and he said, you can't interpret the Bible without the Talmud and the rabbinical writings. And I said, oh, yes, you can. And he said, okay. And he took me right to this commandment, and he said, hey, look, you couldn't possibly understand this at all without the Talmud. And I said, what can't I understand? And he said, well, what does it mean by thou shalt not essentially murder? Does it mean kill or does it mean murder? And I said, well, it doesn't generally mean kill. And he said, you're right. And I said, that's because I have the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit living in me, and he can interpret Torah. And so, this is a kind of a big issue here. It doesn't say you can't kill. That wouldn't allow for self-defense, by the way. And so you need to kind of understand that. What we're talking about is hatred for a fellow image bearer, and Jesus' teaching is going to leave no room for that. Which, by the way, leaves no room for racism, and it leaves absolutely no room for discrimination. Isn't that interesting? So I'm seeing neat things happening here, and I'll have to see what all is going on, because it looks like there's some good news that someone's got, and I'm trying to follow along, but I also want to keep focused. So that'll be the fun stuff I get to look at in just a little bit here. You've heard it said, those of old. Why? Because there was rabbinical teaching and there was general teaching around this. Okay? And the command was clearly known, and that whoever murders will be in danger of judgment. That was understood. The command was well known. It was a key part of Torah. The 10 words used to be recited in synagogue until they phased that practice out. And so, this is all well known. What Jesus is going to say next is not quite the same. Okay? But I say to you, now I want you to pay attention to that for just a second. When Jesus says, "But I say to you," he's claiming the authority to say it. Okay? That's very important. We're talking about command of God here. We're talking about the rabbis. Jesus is claiming authority over the traditions of the fathers. This is going to be the key point of contention with the Jewish leadership. Who are you to claim authority over the sages? By the way, this is where I still feel a lot of the argument is. Okay? I look as though a lot of Rabbi Singer's problem is one, he wants to operate under a pure sort of, mitzvot, get in favor with God system. But the other thing is, he really thinks the rabbis are in charge. He just doesn't say who's in charge of these interpretations. Okay, so it gives you the rabbinical interpretation and says this can't possibly be. But then who regulates how you keep Torah? And he never gets into that. And so Jesus is actually ups the standard even from disallowing for even a settled disposition of bitterness or enmity towards his followers in terms of one another and other individuals. Now, see what's going on here. Jesus authoritatively ups the standard as King Messiah, giving the new standard, the law of Messiah, which disallows for a settled disposition of bitterness. So he's upping the standard here. And I want you to notice the word, whoever is angry with his brother without cause. Can I be angry with people for just reasons? Yes. Okay. I can actually be angry with people for just reasons. I mean, there are reasons to get angry at people, right? Let's be honest about this. But Jesus doesn't say, don't ever be angry if someone does something really nasty. Okay. How you deal with that anger is going to be important. Without cause. A settled disposition. By the way, the cause disappears after the actions, someone does something to you. Being angry with them for 20 years is not being angry at them with just cause. Okay, holding a grudge is not just cause. And so Jesus doesn't allow for a settled disposition of enmity. And that's what he's getting at here. And that's what I'm getting at with the Greek word. The most accurate Greek manuscripts have the word without cause. I misread don't have the words without cause. Okay? Jesus isn't talking about just anger, though. He's talking about resentment. So if your translations do have without cause, it's kind of a translator helping you thing, but the most accurate Greek translations don't have it. So it doesn't appear in the original, but it wouldn't be wrong to assume that Jesus is commanding people. He's not commanding people never to be angry. I guess I got a little twisted there, okay? But that's what I'm sort of getting at. The without cause isn't there, but the idea of settled enmity is there. So this is a textual variant. We don't stick the words in there, but we understand that he isn't talking about justifiable anger. Because there's a cure for justifiable anger, which is going to come up next. And there's our thing. There's an answer for justifiable anger, isn't there? Therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you. Now, what gets interesting here is that after this point, you have a switch from the plural to the singular. So in this section here, the you is you. And then you're going to start to see a switch over from plural to singular. The point is, I could say, well, as a group, we're not angry with so-and-so. He's really giving them interpersonal relationship information. Look who he's giving it to, by the way. You have a zealot in the same exact group as a tax collector. If there was anybody that had a settled disposition of enmity against anybody, it would be Simon the Zealot against Matthew. He would have a total settled disposition against Matthew. Matthew was a collaborator. These are the guys you look to knife in the back. Okay? If you bring your gift to the altar and remember your brother as something, don't go looking. 35 years ago, I think I stepped on someone's cat. Okay, I mean, we can take this to extremes here. The reality is you're going to worship and you know there's a problem between you and your brother. Okay, you know it. You remember the incident. You remember what's going on. This is an application of the essence of Torah. It's so vital we start thinking like this in our ethics, okay? Everything goes back to who God is and what he's like. All right? So whenever I'm thinking about ethics, is something right to do or wrong to do? Now, it does get confusing, okay? But God's character, precept, principle, rule. Okay? So someone says, hey, look, can I be bitter and angry at someone and really hate them and despise their guts forever? Okay? Well, no. God is a God of love. Expressing his character means loving others. Bitterness and resentfulness is contrary to loving others. Therefore, it is not displaying the glory of God. Therefore, it's falling short of the glory of God. See, our whole ethic is based on God's goodness and the fact that we're supposed to reflect it. So this is an application of the essence of God's law. God didn't give his laws just to give rules. This is why I get a little bothered with the mitzvot. What's behind those mitzvot? Can that basic principle or that basic character be developed apart from that mitzvot through other actions? And the answer is yes. And so when you reduce things to ceremonial washings and all of that stuff, not that those things are wrong in themselves, and that's what you focus on to the exclusion of really living the life God wants you to live, you become the worst of the Pharisees. And so here's the essence of Torah being applied by the one who gave Torah. Now, here's a funny thing about things. You get from people what you give to people. People reflect back. In other words, if someone doesn't like me, what do you think my emotional response is going to be to them? Well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to feel an emotional response towards them in light of what they're doing. Whether we should give back kind for kind, we respond as it comes to us. In other words, sowing and reaping takes effect. Okay? I sow resentment. What do I reap? The other person's hatred. So this becomes a vicious circle. They hate me, I resent them more. They see I'm resenting them more, they hate me more. I resent them more, they hate me more. And what we have is a vicious cycle that furthers the darkness. And by the way, that's a good process. Now, people will disappoint you. You will do good and you will occasionally get back bad. Okay, I know that from sharing on the streets. Okay? And that's just fact of real life. And what that does is it tends to make us get real cynical. It tends to make us not happy. But the reality is our resentment creates the fertile ground for further hatred on the other person's part. Okay? And so Jesus is giving a cure. Break the cycle. If you know your brother has something against you, okay, you initiate. Okay, but beyond that, let's get beyond that. You need not to have a settled resentment. The other thing is resentment keeps us from worshiping. I worship God. Yeah. Okay, so how many people do you presently? But I won't sit next to that brother at church. I won't talk to that person. No, there's no way. Okay, well, guess what? Your worship starts to become non-worship. Bring your gift at the altar. See, this refers to like the sacrificial system. And remember, your brother has something. You leave your gift and you go reconcile to your brother, then come and offer your gift. Now, there are problems if your brother doesn't want to reconcile. We're not going there. The attempt has to be made. Why? Because murder begins in the heart. By the way, go back to Cain and Abel and you'll see this pattern. All right? Resentment is contrary to God's ethics. We saw this. This is the essence of the matter. Jesus said, on these two commandments hang the law and the prophets. Wow, doesn't that simplify things? 613 commandments, and that's what you end up getting. Now we get to an apologetics question. Did you guys think I'd get there? Exegesis and apologetics aren't all that unrelated. A good exegete will be a good apologist. And by the way, a bad exegete will not make as good an apologist. Because what do we have to run back to explain our worldview? What do we have to test other claims of other revelations against? But wait a minute now. Isn't the God of the Old Testament the God of wrath? Doesn't divine judgment prove that God is a resentful deity? I think it was Richard Dawkins who described God as an angry deity that demands attention and adoration. A cosmic ogre, if you will. And so I want to take a little bit of time with that. No, God allows us to understand. Now, this is a good refrigerator magnet. God allows us to understand the pain sin causes him either through atonement or judgment. If you get nothing else out of that, I mean, grab this, share this, okay? Why is there hell? Acknowledge the pain sin causes God and see that in atonement, then I will experience the pain sin causes God in judgment. In a real sense, you could say God's sharing the pain. Isn't that kind of a strange concept? But God is actually allowing people to experience the pain sin causes. He will allow them to experience it in terms of him paying the price for that pain, or he will allow them to experience it in terms of experiencing that pain themselves and that separation themselves. You guys can let me know. I'm just getting a warning up here that our high speed is getting a little weird. Hopefully that will go away. Is God a resentful God? No. Sin causes pain to a righteous God. We can end up understanding that pain through atonement, and we can understand that by acknowledging the pain we've caused and accepting his provision, or we can experience that pain in the separation and in terms of that anger against that painful, horrible thing that needs to be dealt with in terms of eternal separation, judgment. So who needs to go to who? Wouldn't you like it if everybody who ever hurt you came to you? I mean, you kind of want that, you know? I'm a big fan of musicals, and there's this My Fair Lady, Just You Wait, Henry Higgins, Just You Wait. And she's doing this whole number here, okay, on Henry Higgins and how he's going to pay the price for having hurt her and having treated her that way. And she's got this whole imagined scenario where she wreaks revenge on Henry Higgins, okay? Um, don't we really want the folks that have hurt us to have to come and take ownership for that? But Jesus doesn't just say we get to do that, right? We don't have to wait for the offended party to hunt us down. In fact, we shouldn't, according to Jesus. If you know your brother has something against you, um, you're to go ahead and take care of that. Okay? Someone put something up. I hope my diction isn't that horrible, but oh yeah. Yeah, because Cockney, you drop the H. Yeah. Because in Artford, Erringford, and Hampshire, hurricanes hardly ever happen. Um, little humor. Um, Awareness brings responsibility. If you're at the altar and you know your brother has something again, in other words, when you become aware of it, you become responsible for it. If you're not aware of it, okay, you're not suppressing, you're not aware of it, you're not responsible for it. And there's a certain amount of truth to that. Okay, awareness brings responsibility. If I know the gospel, I'm responsible to respond to it. Whatever light we have, we're responsible for. Okay? Seek peace and pursue it. So I know this is a little on the shorter end here, but this whole pericope is about the fact that murder is not just the act of murder. Murder is the desire to kill Henry Higgins in your heart. Okay? The minute she's singing this great song about your cries will be too late and she's going to have the king behead him, she's actually guilty of murder. Now you say, wait a minute, that doesn't sound very fair. I haven't done anything yet. The desire to do evil is evil itself. Okay? So the desire to do evil is evil itself, whether I carry it out or not. Now, praise God, we don't carry everything out. But Jesus is going ahead saying, look, if you're considering hatred towards another, hatred is the root of murder. Therefore, you're guilty of murder. So you have heard it said, love your neighbor, but hate your enemy. Okay? You have read where discrimination against Samaritans is allowed. I mean, it's customary to look down on Samaritans. You have read where there's certain feeling towards outsiders, but I say to you that you need to seek peace with all men as much as it's in your power. By the way, this Torah Messiah is repeated in the epistles, which actually I consider the epistles part of the Torah Messiah or the law of Christ. Okay, because they're speaking with Jesus's authority. So sorry about the glitch and the technical variant a little bit, but I don't think Jesus was outlawing any form of anger ever. Otherwise, be angry and sin not later on in Ephesians would make no sense. But the textual variant without cause is not a good textual reading. People would have been aware of it. The Mishnah doesn't necessarily, the writings at the time didn't have it. And there's no reason to think it was there. So just kind of clarifying things. Well, if I was preaching this at Tree of Life, I would be right about on time, and they could all go over and get their coffee and challah, which is Jewish bread, and eat snacks, and we would be right about there. So this is kind of a shorter YouTube video. What I may have to do at points is maybe consider blending pericopes and move from one pericope to the other and discuss how they're connected, which is something that I'd really like to do anyway. I just haven't done it, but it may be wise to see how these pericopes connect. And so I'll be looking at, dealing with these pericopes and how they connect a little bit more. Do rest assured that the connection here isn't as clear because this is the first pericope after Jesus explains his relationship to the law. So it's not tied to another command as of yet. So as we look at this, here's one thing you will see, at least in the next pericope and this pericope: what you do on the inside works its way out. And what's going on in your heart is the same as if you did the deed. So, and there is no problem with having new folks and even new folks with new opinions. I haven't seen any of the folks that have dropped in lately. I'm just looking through because it looked like there was some good news. And if there's answered prayer, I am always interested in answered prayer. So, but I can't settle it. Can't quite figure out what the good news is. So, wait a minute. Okay. So, praise be to God, Sweet Tea's hubby is doing a little better. So, I don't know if that's okay for Facebook, but it's okay with me, and it's okay with God. So, praise be to God. We got answered prayer starting in our community. Isn't that cool? Isn't that neat? We prayed about something last night, and we saw something starting to happen, and that's a real blessing. So, along with apologetics, there's some prayer involved. Isn't that cool? So that's good to hear. We will be back next Wednesday, Thursday. Brief message on, probably do a video wishing you all a happy Thanksgiving. And maybe just a little bit more info. But, Turkey Day is Turkey Day. Enjoy your families. And I will say hi. No, someone asked whether YouTube says I can't. Well, not that I know of, but if I get blacklisted or something, you guys will know I was wrong. I just thinking about other people tuning in on us, but that's cool. And maybe that'll say something about Jesus and Christians praying for each other, won't it? And that may be our finest testimony. So, I would do it anyway. If I have to get in trouble for that, I can get in trouble for worse things. Hey, if you haven't hit the like button, go ahead. Hopefully we'll have a few people view. Again, I was reading my slides. I got to be careful of textual variance. Does not change the inspiration of the word, changes the precision of the human copy machine involved. But the for any reason does not seem to be in most texts. But obviously Jesus is not outlawing anger at all as an emotion. So, Well, folks, you got an early evening. Hopefully, you guys could go ahead. I don't know if anyone else is on tonight, but I thank you guys for tuning in, and I hope this is a blessing to some people. And we will meet again next week, and then it'll be Turkey Day high to y'all, and we'll go from there. God bless. And as I lead out, I'm going to go ahead and put the credits up. I was just listening to a devotional about faithfulness. Faithfulness is doing what you said you would do. And so I'm going to do what I said I was going to do. And so I'm doing what I said I was going to do. I will turn the music down a little bit so we don't get too loud. Actually, I don't think the music is there. So, whoa. I see a lot of clouds. I don't see a lot of credits. If you don't see your name up there, I don't know. Maybe it went to invisible ink. I will have to see what's going on. That is terribly interesting. And there we go. Okay. Should be there. Says it should. Blessings to all of you who have been so supportive of us as we continue to do these and go out and hit the streets. Hey, Mike Winger? Mike Winger, okay. I may not be thinking of the same person. Okay.